Hello and welcome to episode 26 of our weekly podcast, Long Shots, something that we describe as a banter between two news junkies who like to deconstruct various layered real life events. Events is, I think, too broad, probably more from the world of business, finance, and consumer interest oriented topics. Is that a correct, accurate description, Sharad?
Yeah, I think fairly accurate. And we engage in banter only once a week.
Yes, otherwise we just
Otherwise, we're just very plugged in and in the zone, as they say.
wired in.
Wired in.
Yeah, that's correct. So yeah, this is our only conversational release, I guess. For the week, we don't talk to each other otherwise. And well, before we kick this off, usual reminder: do check our episode going live on our podcast channel, which streams on various different eclectic mix of podcast apps, be it iTunes, Deezer, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and so on. So do search for Long Shots, subscribe to our channel so that you get that nice notification every time episode goes live. And with that, this is Nikhil Arora and I have with me Sharad Tupran. So Sharad, to kick off this week, well, obviously weekend was fairly eventful time. The Festival of Democracy in India has officially kicked off. The election dates were announced. Obviously, everyone is getting pretty charged up, but the week also started with a relatively grim, tragic note with the Ethiopian Airlines Boeing 737 MAX 8 aircraft going down. Were you following the topic as and when it was coming out?
Yeah, obviously, in today's day and age, you sort of subscribe to a few of your news publications who send you inbound notifications. So obviously, that made some headlines, and
I think in India, but that headline was probably lost till Monday morning because the election noise was coming.
Yeah, election noise, and we can obviously touch upon the election as well. Interesting. One of the most significant elections, I guess, upcoming. And it's funny, like people are already making their travel plans around being available in their home constituency to cast a vote. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, coming back to the air crash, obviously upsetting, but as such, aviation and airplanes and airlines is extremely heavily discussed and debated subject, just because it sits at that interface of technology and human skill. And you never know which.
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, so there is always these debates, right? Where how important is it unmanned time? What role do pilots play, or can we entirely rely on technology? And it sits, and because the costs of a mistake are there, tangible, real time, can be seen. Rarely do people survive an air crash, so the costs are so tangible and visible. That's why it takes elevated importance, I guess, right?
I mean, aviation is that way a very kind of different industry because there everything is laid out on paper.
Yeah.
Like every process, every protocol. I mean, we keep on reading like statistically how it's the safest form of travel, but as you said, there is practically zero probability of any survival in case some error creeps in either in the system or on the from the pilot's end. And I think for me as an air traveler, what really bothers me is probably there's this such helplessness and effective lack of control when you're a passenger in an aircraft, right?
Yeah.
I mean that I think has a very overwhelming psychological impact. That's why whenever such an event happens, even though statistically it's such a low probability event, whenever it happens, it creates a ripple effect, and rightly so, because it's human lives that we are talking about.
Yeah.
And as you alluded to, it's an interface between technology and human skill at the highest level.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, coming to the Ethiopian Airlines crash, I think what really is a kind of some sign of worry here is that this is the second crash in recent times, which includes the same aircraft, Boeing 737 MAX 8. And because of that, there's a lot of scrutiny, a lot of attention going towards the technology end of this particular aircraft variant. I mean, 737 is an old aircraft. I mean, it's like the workhorse of most airlines.
Yeah,
I mean, in the short haul sector, 2-engine. I'm sure you have flown it at some point of time. I have.
Yeah.
MAX 8 is, I think, an upgrade which came as as some kind of a competition to Airbus A320 Neo, which is again a short haul fuel economy first variant. So I mean, the aviation market is pretty. It's pretty much a commercial aviation market is pretty much a duopoly, right? I mean, you have two big guys.
Yeah.
So they keep on competing with each other. So
The Europeans versus the Americans.
correct. So yeah, Boeing's 737 Max is from a sales and from a performance perspective, I think vouched as a very successful product. But obviously, these two crashes can change all of that.
Yeah, no, exactly right. And obviously, there's a lot of technical nuance to exactly what went wrong in terms of MCAS, or what they say, maneuvering characteristic augmentation system, or it's basically the anti-stall mechanism.
So what exactly is it?
From what I understand, it's the anti-stall mechanism that's put in an aircraft.
Right.
And the way this plane behaved is there is an automated element of adjusting the angle of the nose of the plane to maintain that stall element or prevent stall, which I read. I don't know how genuine it is, and we were talking about it, is some of the pilots flew that without even knowing about that technology. Now that is insane. I can't believe that. It's like, I mean, put that context in a car, okay?
Yeah.
Like, and you'll realize how weird that sounds.
Yeah.
Let's say your cab driver tomorrow tells you that he wasn't aware of handbrake. Or he didn't know how the brake operated. How can you fly a plane if you don't know about an anti-stall mechanism that's put in? So I think the pilots were overcompensating for something that was automatically being done, and which created some out of control.
I mean, I guess still the jury's not out in terms of whether
so this is all.
I mean, whether the onus was on the pilot or on the system.
Yeah.
But I think there are two angles here, right? Yeah. One is that there was some gap in the training element of the pilots, that they were not familiar with this system, and the second is that there is a possibility that some erroneous data was creeping in through the sensors, which was making the aircraft automatically overcompensate or undercompensate, with the pilot not aware of that, which kind of probably led to its demise.
And you know, it'll take time when the official. Have you seen the movie Sully?
Yeah.
The actual verdict is so hard to get because you can. And the other thing is, there is the pilot's not a survivor to actually articulate what exactly happened. Yeah. So it's based on a lot of assumptions, I guess, right? And recording.
I mean, a lot of it depends on the flight controller, which is basically the black box.
Black box,
I'm not sure whether in this case it was retrieved or not.
I'm not sure either.
I think there, at least in the Lion Air crash, I think the flight controller was retrieved, if I recall correctly, and that obviously will give a lot of sense. I mean, but you know, it's what I find it a bit bizarre is that the 737 MAX 8. I mean, there are, I think, almost 2,900 aircraft which are in the pipeline.
Yeah.
And out of which around 350 have been delivered. It's and Indian aviation companies, you know, be it SpiceJet, Indigo, their entire, I think, next 12-month aircraft deployment plan is centered around the 737 MAX 8.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a commercial success. What really surprises me is that if there was some, you know, basic system flaw within the aircraft, be it in the MCAS anti-stall mechanism, or there was some flaw from a training perspective. I mean, this industry just doesn't work like that. How the hell did it, you know, kind of reach at this stage?
Yeah, and it's very funny. And now, like these, I remember looking at the Boeing stock, and it was like creeping up nicely because of very better than expected early sales of this aircraft, and how commercially successful it was being. And like China, I think, orders half of the planes in the inventory anyway, and like you're saying, and now these guys are all grounding these aircrafts. Ethiopian Airlines has done it. I think Canada has done it at a countrywide level. India has done it now. China, of course, has done it. So it's funny, right? Like that there's no, it seems like there's no process which is in place. It's like,
but I mean, this can make or break the company, you know.
I think so. I don't know what percentage of sales these planes constitute. I mean, if it's less than 10%, then maybe they'll struggle but come back up. But yeah, of course.
Actually, I have that number in front of me now. I just opened it up. So it says that Boeing could lose up to 5.1 billion, which is around 5% of the company's annual revenue.
Okay.
So, but I guess the reputational risk can be much bigger than that.
Of course. Would you, if let's say you're flying tomorrow, short haul, and you look at your flight details and you see the aircraft is this one 737 MAX 8,
that would have a factor.
It will be a decision.
It actually, I remember when the Lion Air crash had happened, the very next day I had a flight, and that was actually 737 MAX 8.
Yeah.
I was thinking about it when I was in the aircraft.
There you go, right? So that People are getting more and more sophisticated now. They look at flight details. They look at airline manufacturers now. So obviously, there's a massive reputational factor as well.
I mean, it kind of, if you kind of go back in history, have you heard about Comet by chance? Comet was the first commercial jet airliner. It was, I think it was a British company which had created it. And what had happened was that within 12 months of its manufacture, I mean, at the time when it came in, it was a state-of-the-art aircraft. Like passengers were literally, lining up to fly in it because the amount of luxury, the flight was very smooth. There were no vibrations. I mean, we are talking of like 40s and 50s, At that time, air travel was fairly not as common as it is right now. So passengers were lining up. Airlines were, lining up to order this. And then I think within 12 months or 15 months, I mean, I read it on Wikipedia. I don't know how reliable it is, but I've also seen a documentary some time back. So I think it kind of lines up. I mean, I'm happy to share a link in the description. But what happened 12 months later was that there were a series of crashes. And when they did the analysis, they realized that the metallic frame, like the fuselage, it actually just tears at cruising altitude when there is a certain amount of wind force which is kind of hitting it. And at that time, the concept of wind force and its ability to tear the metallic framework of an aircraft, that itself was very new.
That's
and
interesting.
It kind of got boiled down to faulty riveting in the aircraft frame. So there was some the approach that was followed in actually putting the rivets on the frame were not really suitable for those conditions, and hence the aircraft frame was actually breaking apart mid-air. And I mean that we don't even know who manufactured Comet anymore, because that single thing destroyed the company. And an aircraft which was considered to be the standard for the industry, I mean, it kind of just vanished. So I mean, that's the kind of industry we are dealing with, right? I mean, here, I'm guessing obviously it's not apples for apples here.
No, but that's a interesting insight though, right? Like, I mean, there are maybe 15 years down the line, we'll be talking in the same way about these guys. Like, obviously they're too big to fail, I guess. There's a layer of that, and I find it interesting that, I mean, this is just conspiracy, but the US has not grounded any of those planes. I mean,
I sometimes think, for instance, unless you are, let's say, I mean, one is that you are a very, very brand conscious customer. Let's say you have to buy a luxury automobile, right? And you feel that BMW is better than a Porsche, or it is better than a Mercedes, right? But let's take a step back. Empirically, a premium and BMW product and a premium and Audi product, there's not much which is different, correct? I mean, specs-wise, I mean, I don't think it's going to be like dramatically different, right? And it's exactly the same story with aviation companies. I mean, an Airbus A320neo and a 737 MAX 8 are fairly comparable products. They are both at the pinnacle of engineering excellence, right? I mean, that's the very definition of a duopoly, right? I mean, when it comes to, because if you look at, like, say, both of these companies, I mean, they lobby very hard with the governments of the countries in which they're trying to operate in. They lobby very hard with the industry there. And basically, it's a question of A or B. It's not a question of whether A is a much superior product versus B. But it's a question of A or B. That's it, right? So, I mean, I sometimes feel defense contracts also operate in this pretty similar way, right? I'm pretty sure that a Mirage 2000 and a Sukhoi 30 MKI are not going to be phenomenally different products, right? So that's why I think it can fundamentally break or make a particular company.
Let's see how it goes, and I'd be very curious to see how the US government reacts in terms of what their operational decisions are. Just because it's an American company, and these guys always have these tactical battles with each other. And
I mean, I can't imagine how many government contracts Boeing must be having, pan America. And that factor is going to unfortunately play a role. I mean,
and obviously the stock is down. We always look at what the stock markets are saying. Obviously,
so what, $40 down, $50 down, I think.
About the double digit, like 10 to 12%, I guess, down since Sunday, I guess. So on Monday morning, let's call it.
Airbus stock must be up.
Airbus stock is obviously up because that capital needs to be put somewhere else.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's sort of the grim note, but airplane industry and has got interesting dynamics.
Right.
Like it's so capital intensive and so heavily such a subject to such heavy lobbying, like you said. So it's anyway, we'll follow this story and see what happens.
I mean, the thing is that one would always love to have such a discussion purely on emotional and human factors, considerations.
Yeah.
But I mean, this industry is such that these extraneous things do end up playing a role, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And well, from there, I think from aviation we can move to the stock markets. And I was, I think, was it you or was it someone who forwarded me that article on mutual funds? How the churn in mutual funds is going up and up and up, and how fixed deposits is apparently the asset class of the year. I mean, the year has just started, but
yeah. I remember last year there was an article which said the best asset class has been cash. Yeah. So I mean,
we have graduated a bit from there, right?
Yeah. No, mutual funds have been not good. They've been pretty bad, right? I mean, we discussed that, and I think I was reading somewhere that out of 364 equity schemes in the country, 67% of them had negative returns.
So cool. So cool.
Yeah. So obviously that, like you said, like FDs are rising in terms of their prominence back again, and sort of are checking off that risk-reward trade-off better than some of the equity schemes, I guess. And
I guess the problem is the markets are just so volatile that there's no. I mean, there's no, and especially in the Indian context, I think there's a lot more noise than fundamentals. I mean, I remember like on Sunday the election dates were announced, and I think on Monday the market Sensex was up 13% or something.
Yeah.
And I was like, why? I mean, what new information has come? Like, look at 2014, the elections were kicked off in the month of April. 2019, it's going to be pretty much the same time, plus minus 4 days or 5 days. I mean, I don't know what's going on. Everybody suddenly realized that in a month elections are about to happen, so let's start buying. So I mean, no wonder people who are expecting some sort of a risk-adjusted return are like, okay, I mean, we might as well put it in FD.
Yeah, I mean, it's class A herd mentality, right?
Yeah, I mean
there's nothing new, like you said. The dates are also plus minus 4.
So exactly.
That's really funny.
I mean, the opposition is also kind of making the same noise, right? That, why didn't you announce it 5 days earlier or 5 days later? I mean, it's going to be in that ballpark, right? I mean, it's not going to be suddenly that because it's driven by when the assembly, when the Lok Sabha is going to have its last day. It's not driven by anything else.
Yeah.
So, anyways.
Like in terms of in the FIFA World Cup, like it was a big surprise that they're going to host the next World Cup in the month of winter season. Typically it's the summer because it's in Qatar and weather permit. So imagine like if these guys said, this time elections we're going to run in the winter because it's too hot. That would have that
I get. Yeah. That is new information. I mean, but everything else is not really in that ballpark. So okay, well, I mean, coming back to equities and fixed deposits, I guess. We had some time to look over a bit of data. So interesting was the churn in equity mutual funds, right? In terms of what percentage of investors are now long on equity mutual funds. By long, I mean holding it more than 2 years, and that I think that percentage has dropped dramatically over the last couple of years, right?
Yeah, like what's like it's been systematically being trickling down, I guess.
Yeah, so it's dropped from I think 60% 4 or 5 years ago, and now it's around 41%, if I recall.
Yeah,
correctly. So it kind of has on a downward spin. But the fact that fixed deposits are going stronger than ever, I guess one role is of equities and riskier asset classes not performing in line with expectations. But the second role, I guess, is also that savings are at an all-time low. So banks are naturally incentivized to have a high deposit rate.
Yeah, no, that's correct. And in terms of equities, right, Sensex I think is up like double digit, like 11-12%.
Right.
But the mid cap and the small cap is down like 7% and 16%.
Right.
And even when you look at the sense, like, it's Infosys, Reliance, the big guys, like, and we've talked about
I think you did an analysis, right?
And we've talked about it on a podcast earlier as well. I can't remember, maybe episode 4 or 5, but we've talked about how much sway these big stocks have because of the sheer weight that they have on the index. It just paints a completely different narrative.
Yeah.
It seems like everything is rosy and over. It's actually just 4 or 5 stocks.
Everything is driven by Mukesh bhai.
Yeah, maybe it is.
Anyways, I mean, we don't have to bleep that out, right? I mean, we there's no kind of demarcation between the business side of our podcast and the editorial side of our podcast.
Yeah.
It's pretty much the same.
It is pretty much the same.
Yeah.
So I mean, obviously that's a big factor, right? And yeah, on that note, since we're talking about it, like I think you sent me an article which was pretty interesting on when you have interest rate cuts, and typical corporate finance textbook would tell you that some of it is passed on to commercial lending or retail lending, and that stimulates the economy, and that's the textbook will teach you that. But so many times that it actually doesn't play out like that, because maybe the quantum is a factor, maybe time is a factor. So the article that you sent me sort of suggested, I read it a little bit, but it sort of suggested that the recent rate cut is not entirely being reflected in the lending policies of the big banks. That's probably fair, right?
Right. So I mean, I think a good way to understand is to understand what the basic business model of a bank, right?
Yeah.
So business model of a bank is basically they are giving out loans, charging interest on it, and they are raising funds via wholesale deposits, retail deposits, government lending, etc. And they pay a deposit rate on that. And obviously there has to be a delta between what they pay out to borrowers and what they charge, what they are paying out to depositors.
And that's the money.
And that's the money, right? That's net interest margin, interest income minus interest expense. So what's I think going on in the Indian ecosystem for quite some time is that credit has slowed down.
Yeah.
Right. And in terms of deposit growth also, that is also slowing down, right? So if both of them are slowing down at the same time, the bank is naturally incentivized to have a higher savings rate but a lower rate of lending,
to protect their margins.
But that causes margin pressure, right?
Yeah.
So basically they have to give a high rate of interest to deposit holders, but they are incentivized to charge a low rate of interest from borrowers.
Yeah.
So that kind of really squeezes their net interest margins. So in that context, when a rate cut happens, now the rate cut is the RBI. The mechanism that RBI has as its disposal is that the RBI plays with the repo rate, the repurchase rate, right?
Yeah. Which is at what, 6.75 now?
Yeah, I think so, right? And it kind of went down to 25 basis points in the last one. I think it's 6.5 now, if I recall correctly. I'm not very sure of the exact number.
Yeah.
But so RBI cuts the repo rate. RBI is a net lender to commercial banks. So the theory says that if RBI cuts its rate of lending, then the commercial banks are naturally incentivized to cut their rate of lending to the ultimate borrower, as in the customer.
And that is what
that's not really happening. Correct. Because what really is another factor is that deposit holders are being offered a high rate of return in order to retain them.
Yeah.
Because overall, if you look at household savings behavior, that's going down. So banks have to attract deposit holders still. So what they are doing is, let's say RBI drops the interest rate by 25 basis points, banks are only dropping it by like 5 or 10 basis points.
So that delta,
right?
So it's not entirely being passed on. And sorry, I just checked while you were speaking, it's 6.25 actually.
6.25,
yeah.
so even lower than that,
yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, that is, this kind of dual mechanics are, I think, playing a role. And the interesting thing was State Bank of India. I think now it has become the first commercial bank who has said that now we are going to link our deposit side interest rate as well as our lending side interest rate with the RBI repo rate. They are the only ones who are actually doing it.
That's very interesting. I mean, that sort of mimics, that's closer to the textbook, if you will.
That's closer to the textbook, but what's going to be a repercussion of that immediately is that the savers are going to get pissed off. Because suddenly their
erosion.
Suddenly the savings are going to get eroded. Yeah. And the lenders are going to be all right, and the bank's revenue generation potential will definitely feel some pain.
Yeah.
So it's a kind of a difficult place to be in. But considering, I think SBI has to be the paragon of or central banking policy on the commercial banking side.
True. Yeah.
So yeah, they are kind of taking the first plunge. I think they are not doing it for all deposits. I think they are doing for deposits higher than 1 lakh, if I recall.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know what share of their loan book is. I mean, what share of their deposits come from less than 1 lakh versus more than 1 lakh? That can be a separate discussion altogether.
Yeah. No, but I get the logic behind it.
Yeah.
And I think Mr. Shaktikant Das is obviously sitting down with a lot of these bank guys and trying to come up with some kind of
Yeah, because
framework,
this has been a ongoing point of discussion or debate between central bank and commercial banks. Since eternity.
Yeah.
That the central bank, RBI, always complains that we are obviously playing with the monetary policy levers, but those rates are not being translated at the ground level. I was reading somewhere that the average average time taken to translate an RBI rate cut on ground is almost 9 months.
That's insane.
Yeah.
The inflation numbers change by then.
Yeah.
Everything changes by then.
Yeah, exactly. So they were saying that, if you do a 50 basis points rate cut, you can expect a 20 to 25 basis point rate cut at the ground level. That's the kind of delay.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, either really dramatically drop your interest rates, but that would obviously, spook the markets if you're dramatically playing with your benchmark rate.
And then when you spook the markets, volatility hits and the equity investors get upset.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it kind of has that circularity built in it. But yeah, it's a very interesting, dynamic. I mean, I'm loving it. I used to cover banks and insurance companies. And, even when we used to model the balance sheet of banks, this was always, the NIM, the net interest margin, was such a key assumption when we are kind of looking at what kind of cash generation is going to be there and what kind of asset quality is going to unravel. So it's interesting to see that become part of mainstream narrative.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. And with that, let's switch gears to something lighter and cover something very interesting in the land of audio streaming market in India.
Spotify, 1 million subscribers in 1 week.
Yeah, they grabbed 1 million subscribers in 1 week. But what's interesting is they haven't told or released how many of them are paid. So that requires further scrutiny, but it's an interesting number nonetheless.
Yeah.
But after that, now YouTube Music is launched yesterday.
Right.
And
YouTube. I didn't even know that YouTube has an audio streaming.
Yeah, it's called YouTube Music. They have like YouTube Premium as well, which sort of focus on original programming, more video centric.
Right.
But they have YouTube Music as well. It ties in with Google Play or Google Music or something like that. So it's a proposition now. They've entered India. Priced at $99 a month.
This is
119 was it for Spotify? Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a 20 rupee delta.
Right.
But it's interesting. I like the fact that there are so many players now. Like everything, like Spotify is two big international people. Google, or let's call it YouTube/Google, Spotify. And then obviously there are a bunch of domestic players like Ghana and Savan and
Savan I think got bought by Jio Music.
That's correct. Yes. So Jio, that's a fair point. So Jio Music and Airtel's own Wink or things like that. And it's and I feel like we talked about how pricing will be a key differentiator and content library. In YouTube's case, YouTube Music's case, I think user experience can also be a factor because they're aggressively saying that Indian music has a big video element to it because people enjoy choreography and things like that.
That's a fair point.
So they're saying that we are giving an optionality for you to switch on and off video whenever you want.
Nice.
If you are going for a run, you can turn it off. If you want to watch it while, if you want to actually listen to something while watching, then you have video support in the background.
I mean, it's very, what really is fascinating here is that a big criticism of YouTube video not from a sponsorship perspective, but from a content perspective, has been that if you move out of the app, the video stops.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously that's their business model. They need to make sure that you look at advertisers.
Correct.
Right. But YouTube Music kind of bypasses that.
Yeah, and they're saying that you could have that going in background when if your screen is locked,
right,
or you've opened some other app, the music will go on. So that's like you said, that's key because YouTube sort of, and music you can afford to do that, but I guess when you have a video on simultaneously, then you obviously I guess need to have it open.
Yeah.
At the end, they want more and more eyeballs, right?
Yeah, eyeballs or ear. I don't know.
Yeah.
What do we say? Earballs.
They want more ears, yeah. And so obviously the same model as free for ad supported and premium proposition for non-ad supported.
Right.
So a mix of subscription or ad-based revenue. But it will be very interesting to see because the Indian audio streaming market now has got a bunch of players. And
I mean, that way India is a very, I think, different beast, right? I mean, if it's for free here, it really, I mean, I think as soon as you start charging people here for content, they get put off. So freemium obviously sounds like a more logical way to take it forward. Plus, I don't even think here people, if it's free experience, people don't care if there are too many ads. I don't think, I might be just making a very anecdotal point.
Yeah, it's hard one to say, but in my personal circle, I've met people at two extreme ends. I've seen people who are extremely willing to pay for the quality.
Yeah, but I mean, I think I'm talking of like the average mass market user.
Yeah.
The mass market US user would probably be like, okay, I want a great experience. The app has to be really nice, funky, so on and so forth. Right. I mean, but here I think people are more concerned with how much you pay, and if I get a free, slightly ad interrupted experience, fine.
Yeah. No, I think that's what a lot of let's call it common industrial logic seems to suggest as well, that the subscriber base is extremely cost sensitive in these parts, and
I mean, unless you're able to capture that crème de la crème.
Yeah, and Netflix is an example, right? They've sort of focused on the premium segment and they've not diluted their price point at all. Right. It's sort of almost in line with $10 or $12 or $10 or over like here it's $500 or $650 for HD or something. So it's in line roughly when you convert it also, right? Despite being completely different in terms of purchasing power.
Correct.
But content is an interesting space, and now audio is coming into the front after we've seen all these Hotstars and Primes and Netflix make a lot of noise. So let's see how that goes.
Yeah, it's a brave new world in this domain, I guess. And on that note, I think we can wrap it up for the day. And it was I think again a very diverse discussion, and always fun to do it. And with that, I think we can sign off. Do feel free to rate our podcast, send your comments. Do remember that if you rate the podcast, it gets ranked better on iTunes, so more people can see it. There's a very selfish angle here, so don't forget that. So definitely do. I mean, I'm obviously the rating requesters for the podcast pros who know what I mean. Yeah. Otherwise, just drop us an email or send us your feedback in whichever form. And we'll hope to improve this as and when we go further into it. On that note, this is Nikhil Arora.
And this is Sharat Tupran.
Signing off.